Hey, welcome to the Bald Truth Leadership Podcast, where the place where you get the straightforward, no nonsense, no holds barred ideas on leadership and growth, both personally and professionally. The Bald Truth is brought to you by the Peak Performance Group. I'm your host, Coach Rick Colster, certified executive business coach and the chief coaching officer for the Peak Performance Group, where we help people and organizations align and maximize their potential. Today, ladies and gentlemen, our guest is an expert in the nuclear energy industry. I hope I'm saying that right. And leading from the bottom and all the way up to the top. He has had positions in all levels of the nuclear industry. He's held positions in every facet of this industry, from operator to executive level. He's also a former naval officer who, after years of service to our country, successfully transitioned into the private sector. He's just released a book on lessons in leadership learned both in the Navy and the nuclear industry. Let me welcome our guest, Dave Amerine. Welcome to the Bald Truth, Dave. How are you doing today?
Great, thanks. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
No, it's awesome. It's right there. You checked off all the boxes, sir. You know, naval officer, nuclear energy expert. That you got to be pretty smart to do that. That much I know, because I'm barely say the word. So let's just think about this. Where do we start? Nuclear energy. Where will we be without it? You're the expert.
The rest of the world is turning to nuclear, with the possible exception of Germany. And now Germany is paying a very high price for having shut down its nuclear reactors. I believe our country will come back to nuclear. Right now, we're not really building any more nuclear plants. But it has to come back because nuclear power is safe, it's efficient. The new generation of reactors will be much less expensive than the present reactor designs.
Okay.
And it is absolutely environmentally benign. And it has a virtually inexhaustible source of fuel for centuries to come. So we need to come back to that and catch back up to the rest of the world. At one time, we were the leader, but we've sort of relinquished that leadership role for the moment, I think.
But, you know, it's interesting because there's a lot of fear out there for nuclear energy. Now, we know coal is dirty. We know oil creates hydrocarbons, et cetera. Nuclear doesn't create any of that. Heat pretty much is the only byproduct. But the radiation, that scares the pants off of people. How do we know that it's safe? I mean, that's the thing that I would ask, that I would hear in the news, in the public. How do we know this is safe?
Well, first of all, you know, every time you hear somebody talk about a concern about nuclear reactors and whether they're safe or not, the first thing you hear in this country is 3 Mile Island.
Oh yeah, I was going to school in Delaware when that happened.
Yeah, and that was, 1979, I believe.
79, I was in college.
And one thing that you never hear, the first thing you hear from the press is that, you know, it's going to cause people to be harmed, and for pregnant women would have babies with all kinds of problems. In fact, no member of the public received any radiation from that accident. It was all contained inside the containment building and mostly inside the reactor vessel. And even the workers at 3 Mile Island did not exceed their annual dosage. But the most important thing about 3 Mile Island is, subsequent to that, the industry formed what's called the Institute for Nuclear Power Operations, or INPO.
Okay.
And the whole purpose of INPO was to increase the sharing of experiences at the different plants and to set a standard for training of the operators and the support functions at nuclear power plants. And ever since then, all the statistics that chart performance in nuclear power plants have been on a positive slope. So 3 Mile Island is definitely didn't cause a problem. It actually caused some good things to happen. Okay, so what's the next thing you hear about? Chernobyl. That reactor design would not have been approved in the United States In fact, it would not have been approved by any countries abiding by the World Association of Nuclear Power Operations
Okay.
or the International Atomic Energy Agency. But Russia didn't do that. And where the accident occurred would have been inside containment in the United States and those other countries and would not have allowed the spread of that radiation. Also, these guys that were operating the reactor that night were basically cowboys, no offense to a Texan. And
Yeah, wait a minute now, you know.
and they were operating without approved procedures, and they were doing things off the cuff. That is not allowed in reactors in the United States. So Chernobyl could not happen, would not happen, will never happen, that kind of accident in the United States. So what's the next one? Fukushima. Fukushima is very interesting because they had been alerted by geologists that it is possible to have a tsunami and a large wave, that the restraining wall that they had was not sufficient. But the Japanese culture didn't respond to that. It would be loss of face. Additionally, when that happened, I was on a committee with Dr. Niels Diaz, former chairman of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And he is an advisory to the Japanese cabinet. So because of the time differential, he was on the phone with them every night, and he was advising them to do things, for example, vent the containment, let out a little bit of radioactivity, but keep from accumulating hydrogen gas from what's called zirconium water reaction, which was what was going on. They didn't do that. Decisions in the United States that would be made by plant managers had to go all the way up to the Japanese cabinet. And so not only did it slow things down, but the further up it went, the more political concerns that were dialed in.
That opens up, Dave, that opens up an interesting line of dialogue, is when we talk about the ability to empower your people from a leadership perspective, because, we really focus on leadership here at the Bald Truth. It's how do you empower, what's the power, and how important is it to empower those frontline people to, when something happens, you hit the red button and it stops, whether it's a production line in a manufacturing plant, whether, General Motors, for example, Toyota, for example, here in the United States, if they see something that's wrong going down the production line, they have the right and they have the responsibility to stop the line and fix it. It sounds like that in Japan, they had to go all the way up to the premier, I guess it is. The guy all the way up to the cabinet. Yeah. And say, can we press the red button? Because, by the way, we're melting down here. And I may be being a little more dramatic than what really happened. But what's the importance that you've learned from a leadership perspective of allowing employees, frontline employees, when they see something wrong, to take action?
Well, there's two things. First of all, you want to empower employees at all levels to take responsibility and to be able to take action based on their training. It is so vitally important. And that's what goes on in nuclear power plants. We train the people. They have to pass both written exams as well as oral exams to be able to assume their position. And so that aspect in the nuclear industry, and I'm sure it applies to other industries as well, is a vital ingredient to providing the empowerment that you just mentioned. But there's one other very, very important thing, and it's part of what I discuss in detail in my book, and that is the creation of a safety-conscious work environment. Now, what is a safety-conscious work environment? A safety-conscious work environment is a work environment where any employee feels empowered to bring up any kind of concern or question or suggestion without fear of retaliation, and with full confidence that that issue or concern will be addressed by management based solely on its merits without ascribing any motive to the employee for bringing that up.
Okay.
Now, establishing and nurturing that kind of environment is very difficult, and it requires the right mindset of management and continual strengthening of the employee's belief that management welcomes that kind of input.
Now, you nailed it, though. You said the word mindset. Now, I'm a huge proponent of having the right mindset. And when I coach my execs, when I coach my folks, I work with our young leaders and our existing leaders. It's really about having the right mindset. And it's interesting. I had a former nuclear naval officer, also a Naval Academy graduate like yourself. He was on one of our earlier podcasts and just talked about just what he said. He actually rolled out one of the first nuclear-powered submarines. He was on that to make that work. Yeah, sharp guy. So as you think about that, you say he had to empower his people, have the right mindset where it's not – and the military hierarchy, if you think of the military hierarchy, and I'm sure that the nuclear industry has the same type hierarchy. We're a little worried down here as us little guys that are just starting off on the front line, and the big bosses might get mad at us. Now, how do you do that empowerment? What kind of mindset is necessary, and how do you accomplish it? There's the thing is what I really would like to find out and hear from you is we know it's necessary. How do you get there?
Well,
what's it take?
Again, I cover this in my book, Rick, but let me give you just the essentials. The first thing a leader has to do is establish the workplace priorities. And in my case, what I always did, particularly I was brought in as the new leader 8 different times to recover nuclear projects that had issues or nuclear power plants that had been shut down for operational and management.
Yeah, because you're like a turnaround expert.
Troubleshooter.
Okay.
Yeah. So what are those workplace priorities? Safety, quality, schedule, cost, in that order. And what I explain to people, particularly management, but everybody, that if the first 2, safety or quality, ever suffer, soon, if not immediately, the schedule and costs are going to be impacted, perhaps significantly. So you had to establish those workplace priorities, and there's ways to do that. And over again. Then I already explained the safety conscious work environment, which supports those 4 workplace priorities. But the next thing that I drilled home was what I call conduct of operations. And I always group things in groups of 4 because people seem to be able to get their mind around that most easily. And I said, here are the 4 aspects of conduct of operations. First and foremost, personal accountability. You are responsible for your job and doing it as best you can. Mm-hmm. Second is procedure compliance. Now, a lot of times you get pushback on procedure compliance because people say, hey, I don't need to be constrained by a procedure. What they don't understand is that procedure was written by an expert with not being under duress. And then it was taken to whatever facility and actually walked through. And that, with your experience, is the most, gives you the highest probability of success. And if the procedure, you don't understand the procedure, stop and either get it explained to you or get it changed. The third one is technical inquisitiveness. I always tell people, make sure you understand not only your job to its boundaries, but also beyond it. Have that sense of inquisitiveness that helps you understand the full breadth and depth of the situation you're in.
So ask questions.
Absolutely. And that brings you back to the safety conscious work environment, doesn't it?
Sure.
The ability to stop and ask questions if you're unsure. And the fourth thing is that willingness to stop. I look for times when if an operator had stopped some sort of an evolution because he or she was unsure of something and wanted to either get the procedure clarified or they wanted to get some part of what was going on explained to them better than they understood it, I would
Makes
take
sense.
the opportunity, and especially I would come out on a back shift. Now, I was president of the company, and I would come out on a back shift and shake that operator's hand and thank them, even if they were wrong, but have the courage to stop and get things clarified. And that reinforced that that's really what we wanted. So those are the four things, the
Okay.
workplace
So, and that's it.
priorities.
That's leadership. That's what leadership is, I think, is all about. A big component of leadership. We had another guest, former XO of a nuclear aircraft carrier, okay? And they're all nuclear powered, right? I think
They are now.
and they are now. And but I mean, think about that. He said he had what he called rumor control, and he would go down into the enlisted mess. This is the XO, full bird captain. He'd go down to the enlisted mess and have lunch with them. Of course, they all freaked out just a little bit when the XO walks in. It's like, holy crap! Oh no, what's going to happen? And you just sit down and you have lunch. Okay, what are you guys hearing? And same for you. When the willingness to stop, if you allow your guys to stop. I say guys, I say people to stop when they see something that's amiss, that's awry. And they're willing to have that conversation. Like you said, you're the president of the company, and you went straight down to the frontline shift operator and said, thank you for your input. That's huge. I think that vulnerability, transparency, there's some great leadership traits right there, Dave.
Well, you just said something that what I determine the most powerful things a leader can say are, I was wrong, I am sorry, and thank you. Now, if you're saying the first two too often, you need to re-examine how you're doing business. Mm-hmm. But you can never say the third one, thank you, often enough. When I was brought in as president of Nuclear Fuel Services, and you just mentioned the nuclear-powered Navy. Well, Nuclear Fuel Services, located in Irwin, Tennessee, is the sole provider of the nuclear fuel for our Navy's aircraft carriers and submarines. And it had been shut down by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission for some operational and management issues. And I was brought in and replaced the president with the task of getting our license back. So you can easily understand what a tremendous responsibility and challenge that was.
Oh, absolutely.
So I did the things that we just talked about, and in a nuclear plant, of course, Nuclear Fuel Services qualifies as a nuclear plant. It's making nuclear fuel. You have to have a lanyard around your neck where you carry your identification and also a radiation detector. Well, I asked all employees to carry also on that lanyard a card. And the card had on one side the 4 workplace priorities: safety, quality, schedule, and cost. And on the other side, it had the 4 aspects of conduct of operations: personal accountability, procedure compliance, technical. I
absolutely love that.
And a willingness to stop. And I would see an employee out in the workplace, and I'd stop and I'd chat with him or her about what was on the card. And I'd ask them to explain in their words, not my words, in their words, what those 4 things meant to them.
Think about how that builds culture. Now, one of the big things we do here at the Peak Performance Group is we help companies and organizations grow. That's what we're all about. We do that through leadership, but we also use a process called the Business Acceleration System that helps them put processes in place, the right people in place, manage cash flow. One of the things that's huge when we talk about the process piece of it is designing the plan of action moving forward. And we call that our SP squared, which is a single page strategic plan, really literally 1 page. So it's SP squared. And one of the first things we have them do is design their values. And this is almost like a set of values. As I see it, these are a set of core values that you've got to abide by. Workplace priorities. When you talk about your workplace priorities, value is safety, quality, scheduling, and cost. Those are all could be considered core values. I love that. and then you have them actually hanging around and talk about those. That must have built for you a culture that combined all those components in it. Now, when you tried to implement that, when you first came in to implement, did you get some pushback, or the people say, "Oh, wait a minute, who's this crazy and good-looking bald man?" By the way, who's this crazy good-looking bald man? That's what they say about. They don't say good-looking; they just say crazy bald man. Who's this guy that's going to come in and try to tell me how to think? Did you get pushback, and how did you overcome that?
Well, when you first come in as the new leader, the thing that you've got to do is gain people's trust. And trust is usually in these situations where plants had been shut down for whatever reason, trust was already low. And so
sure.
Trust is hard won and easily lost. And so the way to gain people's trust is let them know what your values are, and then let them see by your actions that you really do believe in those values. And as people start to reflect those values, find opportunities without embarrassing them, because people get embarrassed even when you congratulate them in front of others, but to reinforce those values. By the way, you're talking about my haircut. After I was brought in at Nuclear Fuel Services, there was an article, it was a front page on the business magazine in Tennessee. Remember, Nuclear Fuel Services is located in Irwin, Tennessee.
Sure.
And the title of it, and I'm looking at it on my wall because I kept it, was my picture covered the whole magazine cover, and underneath it said Mr. Clean.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That's awesome. Hey, you know what? That's the style. And, I'm taking a wild guess here. And occasionally I throw it out there a little bit that we've both had this hairstyle for quite some time. We did it before it was cool. Before Michael Jordan made being bald cool, we already had it. I mean, I've been bald since I'm 23. So this is what it is. And the good news is we both have good heads that it looks good on. Some not so much. I've seen some pretty ragged heads out there. So, all right. So keep it in line with what we're doing. And you're talking about people. And I believe people are your best asset. So when you build your organization, I love that you've got your priorities, your workplace priorities, and your conduct of operations. Was that your key? Was that the key to build a successful organization, or a well-run organization? And I say successful because I always think of the private sector as we're trying to make money. You may not always been trying to make money. I'm sure there was some dollars involved, but it was really about making sure that these priorities, workplace priorities, were in place, and your conduct of operations were being followed at all times. Because safety, I think, is the number one priority in your business. I'm just taking a wild guess, but I like to hope that safety is your number one priority when it comes to it. Is that the process that you could duplicate over and over again?
Absolutely. And it worked. And all these places I were brought in, they were shut down. And people were feeling bad about themselves. And when a nuclear power plant is shut down or a nuclear project is stopped, the cash register keeps ringing. It costs a lot of money until you can restore that nuclear power plant to making electricity, or you can get that nuclear project back making progress towards its ultimate operation. So the finances were a big issue all the time. But what I tried to get everybody to understand, including my boards of directors, is that safety and quality are the best things for you to be able to make money. In the nuclear industry, for example, we talked about 3 Mile Island earlier, but after the Institute of Nuclear Power Operation was put in place, year after year after year, by the measurements that they had, the safest, the nuclear power plants with the best industrial safety. There's industrial safety, nuclear safety, RADCON safety, but the best industrial safety by their metrics were also the top 25 in other operational and money. For example, if you shut down a nuclear power plant for refueling, the quicker you can get that done and get back online, you start making money again.
Revenue. Yeah, makes sense.
And so those are the kinds of metrics that you are an example of how well the plant is operated and how well it's managed. But the other metric is how safe is it, and how many quality issues do they have. And what you find is the safe plants, the plants that have a high regard for quality, are also the ones that are your top money makers.
Oh, it makes total sense. I do a lot of work in the construction industry, and safety is paramount in construction. When you talk about building concrete, I call it breaking little rocks or big rocks into little rocks, the aggregate industry, where they basically dig rocks out of the ground and break it into rocks all the way down to sand. And safety is paramount, because the last thing you want is one of your people to get harmed or hurt, because that's, you're talking about heavy machinery. Of course, you're talking about nuclear energy, which is in and of itself dangerous without controls in place. So switching gears just a little bit, we're coming up on the 4th of July. And, in today's environment, and I'm curious as to your take on this. So this is your personal take for you, is what's it mean to you as a former naval officer? What's the 4th of July mean to you?
Well, I served in our country's Navy, and I believe that we live in the greatest country on earth, the greatest country in the history of mankind, built on the principles of our founding fathers. I am very dismayed by the things that are going on in our country today. And so every day, I get down on my knees and pray for our country, and that we will have sanity restored to how we go about things, and people will value the gift that this country is to them, the freedom and the liberty that we have, and not give that up for things that I call entitlements.
And you're absolutely right. I think that's the core of where we are as a country is, believe that we are in a good place. Because this morning we chatted before we started the recording, was we both got to go out and get our workout in. I took a nice 5-mile walk in the park with my wife. You can't do that in some places.
That's right.
You can't leave your front door. You can't leave your front porch for fear sometimes. Now, there are good and bad areas here, but for the most part, we've got a great country. And I think we need to realize that back and appreciate it. And I love the fact that you said you get down on your knees, Dave. I think that's something that we need to do wholeheartedly as a society, is just pray. And I don't care who your God is, what you pray to, but pray. I pray for others. I pray for their safety. I'm a new grandfather as of the last 2 years. And what an amazing, wonderful experience that is. And I pray that their lives is better, that they live in a great world where people love each other completely and fully. And that's the thing I pray for. It's not to try to put anyone's my thoughts in your head. You have to think like I do. I just pray that you're good. And I think that's wonderful. Thanks for sharing that. And for those that are listening and those that are watching, take that to heart. This is from a man who has experienced life in a lot of different ways. And every day he gets down on his knees and he says, thank you for the blessings I have. And I think we need to do that more and more. So I want to be conscious of your time. And I know that you've got a book you've got to promote. But before we dive into that, and I want to hear a little bit more about the book, I always have some questions that I think uncover a man or a woman, a person, that uncover who they are. And it's not about your industry, and it's not even about leadership. I call them the bald truth question, because they uncover everything. It's straightforward, no nonsense. So here it is. I've got a couple of quick questions for you, Dave, and make you think a little bit. So here's what the bald truth wants to know. You're holding a dinner party. You get to hold a dinner party for 6, and you get to invite anyone in all of history, anyone who has been born, who is dead or alive, has been born from beginning history to today. You get to invite 5 people. You're one. A dinner party for 6. You're one. There are 5 people. Who do you invite and why?
Well, what a great question, thought-provoking. So, but this is off the top of my head. 5 people. Well, the first person I would invite would be Jesus Christ. I recently came back from the Middle East, and it was a very, very thought-provoking. And what was one of the most amazing things to me was when you read the Bible, Jesus and his disciples were in place A, and they did whatever they did. And then the next verse, they're in place B. Well, what I saw was the topography between A and B. You were out for a walk this morning. I bet you had comfortable shoes. Those guys were going over really tough terrain with sandals. So Jesus would be one. Benjamin Franklin would be another one. I just love his philosophy, and he was just a very astute guy at a time when a country really benefited from having him. Another person that I would love to have dinner with is Thomas Sowell. Thomas Sowell is a Black economist, and he just is able to capture things so succinctly and so eruditely that I would love to have Thomas Sowell there. I guess I would counterbalance a guy who I read several books about, is Malcolm X.
Okay.
I would think that would lead to an interesting dialogue, particularly since he was a convert to Islam. And then you have Jesus on the other hand. One of the things that I saw when I was in the Middle East were these monuments that go back 3,000 and 5,000 years before the birth of Christ. So I guess another person who founded the Jewish religion would be Abraham. So I would like to also have him. And then I guess to top it off, I would really enjoy having the time to talk with Warren Buffett. So there's a pretty eclectic crowd for you.
That's a great crowd. What a great interest. And I'm sure the conversation would be interesting because, I think everyone, and I don't know Thomas Sowell, but I'm going to find out who he is because that's curious to me because I want to see what you see in that. But really, it's just having these conversations. And I love doing this for all my guests because it really uncovers how we think, how we feel. And this next question is really going to uncover something about how you feel and what your legacy is. I think legacy is important for every person, regardless of who they are. So here's the second question. The second bald truth question is this. An article's being written about you after you're gone. We all have an expiration date. Nobody knows when it is. One guy knows when it is. After you're gone, an article's being written about you. What's the title? Not what's in it, but what's the title? What's the headline?
Well, that's certainly another thought provoker. I would like to think that headline is, here is a man who had a positive impact. And then hopefully the article would explain why it had that headline, a positive impact.
Awesome.
Positive impact on the people that I was fortunate enough to work with and lead, and a positive impact on the friends and family that I've also been very fortunate to have. In particular, my wife, Cindy. I'm married for 51 years to
God bless you,
the
man. That's
same
great.
Absolutely wonderful person, and my book is dedicated to her. She passed away 2 years ago from ALS.
Sorry.
And her courage and dignity and even humor during the 4 years of decline due to ALS forever made her my hero. So hopefully I had a positive impact on her because I know she certainly had a positive impact on me.
Sounds like it. That she did. Sounds like a wonderful woman. So now, final question is, what do you do every morning to set yourself up for success?
One thing I've done in my entire life is the first thing I do is I work out. And I'm 76 years old, and I just came back this morning from pushing a bunch of weight around. Let's see, what am I back up to after not being able to work out during this coronavirus? Back up to doing sets of 12 with 275 pounds on the bench. And I'm doing a lot more when I was at Harvard.
Much respect. Much
at
respect.
Harvard, I was doing it with 350 pounds. But since then, I've obviously gotten older, but I've had both shoulders replaced.
Okay.
So the first thing I do every day is to work out. And I used to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning so I could get that hour workout in and still be the first guy at work.
Wow. Well, if it takes getting your shoulders replaced to bench 275 pounds, I'll be making that appointment pretty quick. That's impressive. I got to tell you, regardless of your age, I say that's regardless of that. So I wish I could do that any days. So, all right. So Dave, you've got a great book, and I know you want to talk a little bit about your book. So give us a couple minutes about your book, where we can get it, and when it's being released. Give us a little news on your book.
All right. Well, thank you very much. The book is available on Amazon.com, and it was actually a bestseller for, I think, a day. But
good.
It's about my experiences in the nuclear industry, particularly as a troubleshooter. And I think those experiences and the lessons I learned, and that includes from mistakes as well as successes, can be of use to others who might find themselves in similar situations, regardless of the industry or the endeavor. In the first part of the book, I provide my background, my education, as well as my service in the nuclear submarine force. And then I talk about the approaches and techniques developed over 45 years from handling the challenges I faced and managing people in those trying situations.
So, let's get the name of the book, and they can find it. What's the name of the book? And I'll if you look below, folks, you see the name of the book right there.
Okay, the name of the book is Push It to Move It. Lessons learned from a career in nuclear project management.
You got it. Just look below, folks. There'll be a tag right there. There'll be a link for you, and you can go to Amazon and get Dave's book. Make it a bestseller for another day. Let's go. Let's get Dave some book sales, have a little fun and raise those rankings right up, folks. Dave, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. And have a blessed 4th of July. We got 4th of July coming right up. So have a great 4th of July. Be safe. Remember, safety first. And
you bet. Absolutely. Rick, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Our pleasure. You've been listening to The Bald Truth with Coach Rick of the Peak Performance Group, the company that helps people and organizations reach their potential. If you're looking for a way to grow your organization in sales or strategic direction, the Peak Performance Group, our coaches can help you grow with our proven business acceleration process. So call us at 817-748-7425, or you can reach us on that World Wide Web at www.mypotentialplus, and that's .com, and we will connect you with the right coach. Remember, subscribe and like below, folks. We're available on iTunes, Spotify, iHeart, YouTube video. So like and subscribe, and you'll get all the information every time the new Bald Truth comes out. I'm Coach Rick, and that's The Bald Truth.